At the family custody hearing, my 6-year-old grandson, Leo, looked me in the eyes and called me the meanest grandma. His mother, Seraphina, smirked beside him. My heart broke. But then I saw a flicker of doubt in Leo's gaze. That's when I knew I had to fight. Not just for them, but for their father, my son. Like, share, and let us know where you are listening from, so my story can reach everyone who needs to hear it. Evelyn Maxwell sat rigid on the hard wooden bench, the silence of the courtroom pressing down on her like a heavy stone. Her gaze was locked on her grandson, 6-year-old Leo, who stood on a small stool, barely visible over the witness stand. His small voice, usually full of innocent laughter, now sounded strained and unnatural. "Grandma Evelyn is mean," Leo declared, his words echoing in the hushed room. "She's the meanest grandma in the whole world." Each word was a hammer blow to Evelyn's chest. Her heart, already fragile from recent losses, shattered into 1,000 pieces. She saw fear in Leo's wide blue eyes, but also a chilling conviction that twisted her gut. This was her Leo, her sweet boy who used to cling to her, burying his face in her lap. Now, he looked at her as if she were a monster. The image of the loving grandson she knew, the one who would run to her for hugs, was replaced by this frightened child parroting cruel words. It was a pain so sharp, it stole her breath. Beside Leo, Seraphina, his mother, sat perfectly still. Her face was a masterclass in concerned motherhood, eyebrows furrowed just so, a slight frown playing on her lips. But Evelyn, with a mother's keen eye for deceit, caught it a fleeting, almost imperceptible smirk that vanished as quickly as it appeared. It was a micro-expression, a flash of triumph that confirmed Evelyn's worst fears. Leo continued, his voice picking up a rehearsed cadence. "She tries to take me away from Mommy. She makes my sister Chloe cry." Evelyn closed her eyes for a brief moment, the accusations swirling around her. She knew these words were twisted, dark reflections of a distorted reality. "She tries to take me away from Mommy" was Seraphina's version of Evelyn, fighting for her rightful visitation, trying to maintain a bond that Seraphina was systematically dismantling. "She makes my sister Chloe cry" was the cruelest lie of all. Chloe cried. Yes, but not because of Evelyn. Chloe cried when Seraphina dragged her away from Evelyn's house after the all-too-brief visits, her little heart breaking at leaving the only place she felt truly safe and loved. Chloe, Leo's twin sister, sat across the room, withdrawn and small beside her court-appointed advocate. Her usually bright brown eyes were downcast, her shoulders hunched. She avoided eye contact with everyone, especially Evelyn and Seraphina, a silent testament to the fear that gripped her. Evelyn's mind drifted back 3 years, to when her son, Michael, first introduced them to Seraphina. It had been a whirlwind romance, a dazzling storm that swept Michael off his feet. Evelyn had felt a quiet unease even then, a subtle sense that Seraphina was too possessive, too quick to draw Michael away from his family and friends. Michael, blinded by new love, had brushed off Evelyn's gentle concerns. He said Seraphina just loved him intensely, wanted to be with him always. Evelyn, wanting her son to be happy, had tried to push her worries aside. She attended their wedding, smiled through the pictures, and hoped for the best. Then, the world had come crashing down. Michael, her beloved son, had died suddenly in a tragic accident just over a year ago. The grief had been a monstrous beast, tearing at Evelyn's soul, leaving her hollowed out. But even in her darkest despair, a flicker of light remained. Her grandchildren, Leo and Chloe. They were Michael's legacy, a piece of him still here. Evelyn had known, even through her tears, that she had to stay strong for them, to protect them. But Seraphina had wasted no time. The isolation began almost immediately after Michael's funeral. Visits became an Olympic challenge, riddled with excuses and last-minute cancellations. Phone calls went unanswered, text messages ignored for days. When Evelyn finally did get to see the children, they were often visibly neglected, hungry, their clothes ill-fitting and sometimes dirty, their spirits subdued. Evelyn's attempts to offer help, to suggest a hot meal or new clothes, were met with cold dismissal. "You're always criticizing," Seraphina would snap. "You're overstepping your bounds, Evelyn. They're my children now." The breaking point had come 2 months ago. Evelyn had managed to secure an afternoon visit with the twins. As Chloe played, Evelyn noticed her favoring her right arm. Gently, Evelyn asked what was wrong. Chloe, her lower lip trembling, pulled up her sleeve. A dark bruise, the size of a plum, marred her delicate forearm. "Don't tell Mommy," Chloe had whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "She said it was my fault. She said it hurt because I was clumsy." In that moment, Evelyn knew. The quiet concerns, the subtle manipulations, the blatant neglect, it all coalesced into a horrifying truth. Her grandchildren were not safe. Michael's children, her precious grandchildren, were suffering. A fierce, unyielding resolve hardened inside her. She would fight for custody. She would fight for them. No matter the cost. No matter what Seraphina threw at her, Michael would have wanted her to protect them. Evelyn's lawyer, Isabel, a woman with kind eyes and an iron will, nudged her arm gently. "Evelyn," she whispered, her voice low, "it's our turn. Time to present our evidence." Evelyn took a deep breath, pushing down the surge of despair. Just then, Leo glanced back at her, and for a split second, she caught a flicker of confusion in his eyes, a momentary break in his rehearsed performance. It was a tiny spark, barely there, but it was enough. It was a sign that the boy she knew was still in there, somewhere beneath the fear. It was all the strength Evelyn needed. She would fight for their safety. She would fight for Michael's memory. The image of Leo's frightened face in the courtroom replayed in Evelyn's mind. It brought her back to the beginning, to Michael's swift engagement to Seraphina. It had all happened so fast. One moment, Michael was dating. The next, he was announcing a wedding. Evelyn, ever eager to be involved in her son's happiness, had offered to help with everything, choosing flowers, tasting cakes, planning the reception. Seraphina, with a polite smile that never quite reached her eyes, gently dismissed every offer. "Oh, Evelyn, thank you. But I have it all handled. I want it to be perfect, a complete surprise for Michael. Or, no, really. I've got my vision. I wouldn't want to trouble you." Evelyn, trying to be understanding, had simply felt a growing distance, a subtle exclusion from her son's new life. Sunday dinners had always been a sacred tradition in Evelyn's home, a lively gathering of family and laughter. After Michael married Seraphina, those dinners began to dwindle. At first, Seraphina had plausible excuses. "Michael has a big project due Monday," or, "We're feeling a bit under the weather." But soon, the excuses became more frequent, more flimsy. Then came the phone call, casual but chilling. "Evelyn," Seraphina had said, "you know, Michael and I are a package deal now. Our lives are intertwined." It was a polite way of saying Evelyn no longer had direct access to her son without Seraphina's approval. It was a subtle warning shot, a clear statement that Michael was hers now. When the twins, Leo and Chloe, finally arrived, Evelyn had been overjoyed. She imagined all the time she'd spend with them, helping Seraphina, sharing in their upbringing. But Seraphina had other plans. Her own mother, a stern woman Evelyn had met only briefly, moved in almost immediately after the birth. Evelyn's offers to help with sleepless nights, to cook meals, to simply be there, were gently but firmly rebuffed. "Mother has it all covered," Seraphina would say. "She knows my routine." Evelyn had poured her love into hand-stitched quilts for the babies, soft blankets meant to wrap them in warmth and her affection. Seraphina had accepted them with a tight smile, only for Evelyn to later see them neatly folded and tucked away in a closet, replaced by store-bought, impersonal blankets. It was a quiet rejection that stung more than any harsh word. The most telling moment came on the twins' second birthday. Evelyn, beaming, had brought 2 shiny new tricycles, one bright red, one sunny yellow. The children's eyes lit up, but Seraphina's smile faltered. Later that day, as Evelyn walked back towards the house, having momentarily stepped outside, she heard Seraphina's voice from inside the open kitchen window, laced with a venom she rarely displayed in Evelyn's presence. "Honestly, Michael, look at these hideous death traps. What was your mother thinking? So tacky." The children will break their necks. Evelyn froze, the words sinking into her heart like shards of ice. That evening, Michael had brought the tricycles to Evelyn's house. He looked uncomfortable, avoiding her gaze. Seraphina thinks they're a bit too big for them right now, Mom, he mumbled, trying to make light of it. She's just protective, you know. Very careful with the kids. Evelyn had nodded, a hollow feeling spreading through her. She knew Seraphina wasn't being protective. She was being possessive. In that moment, Evelyn truly understood. Her grandchildren were Seraphina's exclusive territory, not a shared family joy. Michael, her son, was too deep in Seraphina's control to see it, or perhaps too afraid to confront it. Then, Michael died. The accident had ripped Evelyn's world apart. But even in her raw grief, Seraphina had managed to inflict more pain. We need space to process this as a family. Evelyn, she had said, her voice strangely calm, just days after the funeral. We'll call you when we're ready. It was a complete shutdown, a cruel isolation that left Evelyn drowning in her sorrow, desperate for the comfort of her grandchildren, the last living pieces of her son. 2 agonizing weeks later, Seraphina finally allowed a visit. Evelyn rushed over, aching to hold Leo and Chloe. But when she saw them, they seemed distant, almost hesitant. They looked at her with confusion, as if trying to place her face. As Evelyn reached out for Chloe, Seraphina had stepped between them, gently but firmly pulling Chloe closer to her side. Chloe, darling, remember what we talked about, she murmured, a warning hidden in her tone. Evelyn, desperate, had been forced to file for grandparent visitation rights. The legal process was draining, but it was her only option. Even with court orders, Seraphina continued her games. Calls were sabotaged, visits cut short, or children arrived visibly neglected, hungry, dressed in clothes too thin for the weather, their hair uncombed. Evelyn would feed them, clean them, and fill their brief time with love, trying to undo Seraphina's subtle damage. One afternoon, during a visit Evelyn had fought tooth and nail for, Chloe had leaned in close, her tiny voice barely a whisper. Mommy says, "We can't tell you stuff or you'll take us away." Evelyn's blood ran cold. The manipulation was blatant, insidious. From that day on, Evelyn started documenting everything, every missed call, every canceled visit, every instance of neglect, every strange bruise. She kept a detailed journal, date by date, time by time. 9 months ago, the situation escalated dramatically. Evelyn was dressing Chloe after a bath at her house when she noticed them finger-shaped bruises on Chloe's delicate back. Dark, undeniable marks. Evelyn's heart seized with terror. "Chloe, what happened here?" she asked, her voice trembling. Chloe looked around frantically, then whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Mommy's friend Damien did it. He was mad." Evelyn didn't hesitate. She called Child Protective Services. The investigation was a blur of interviews, questions, and endless waiting. But in the end, it was inconclusive. Seraphina had plausible explanations, blaming a playground fall, a rough game with other kids. Damien, the friend, vanished from the picture, presumably advised to disappear. The case was closed, leaving Evelyn with a sickening feeling of helplessness and a hardened resolve. That was the final straw. The court's inability to protect Chloe, Seraphina's clear lies, and the fear in her grandchildren's eyes cemented Evelyn's decision. She filed for custody. This was no longer just about visitation rights. It was about their safety, their very lives. This was what had led her back to this sterile courtroom, fighting for the children Michael had left behind. She felt Michael's presence then, not a ghost, but a warmth in her chest, a silent encouragement. "Fight for them, Mom," she imagined him saying. "Don't give up. They need you." Evelyn took a deep breath, clutching the small, worn photograph of Michael she kept in her purse. She wouldn't give up. Not now, not ever. Leo and Chloe's safety, their futures, everything was at stake. The courtroom drama and Leo's words still stung, but Evelyn knew she couldn't falter. She needed evidence, irrefutable proof to counteract Seraphina's manipulations. Her first breakthrough came unexpectedly during a parent-teacher conference with Miss Davies, the twins' kindergarten teacher. The meeting was supposed to be routine, but Miss Davies's demeanor was anything but. She sat across from Evelyn, fidgeting with her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Maxwell," Miss Davies began, her eyes darting nervously towards the door. "I've been very concerned about Leo and Chloe." She lowered her voice further. "Chloe often comes to school in the same clothes 2 or 3 days in a row. And Leo, poor little boy, he falls asleep at his desk more often than not. Both children, they often tell me they're hungry. They devour their lunch like they haven't eaten in days." Evelyn's heart clenched. This confirmed her worst fears. She listened, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as Miss Davies continued. "Leo, he told me once that sometimes we don't have dinner at home because Mommy forgets." The words hit Evelyn hard, a stark confirmation of the neglect she had suspected. Miss Davies then pulled out a folder, her movements hesitant. "I've also noticed some troubling patterns in their drawings." She laid out several sheets of paper. Chloe's drawing depicted a house, but it was shrouded in dark, swirling clouds. Leo's showed stick figures of adults with exaggerated, cartoonish bottles beside them, while small children huddled in a corner. The innocence of children's art twisted into a silent cry for help. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Miss Davies explained, "Seraphina has tried to dismiss my concerns. She said Chloe is just artistic, and Leo has an overactive imagination. She even threatened to sue the school if I interfered in her family matters." But despite Seraphina's threats, Miss Davies had documented everything meticulously: the dates of Chloe's repeated outfits, Leo's naps, their hunger, the content of their drawings. She pushed a stack of photocopies across the table. "You can use this, Mrs. Maxwell. These children need someone to speak for them." Evelyn left the school feeling a strange mix of despair and hope. The very next morning, a new piece of the puzzle fell into place. An email arrived from an unfamiliar address. The sender identified himself as Derek, Seraphina's ex-boyfriend. "I heard you're fighting for those kids," the email read. "Seraphina's not fit to raise them. I've got proof of her manipulative and volatile past. Those kids deserve better." Attached were numerous files, photos and videos of Seraphina. They showed a side of her Evelyn had never witnessed: Seraphina drunk, screaming obscenities, throwing dishes against a wall, even threatening self-harm during their arguments. It was a terrifying glimpse into a chaotic, unstable life. Evelyn felt a surge of nausea mixed with renewed determination. This crucial information spurred Evelyn to action. She immediately hired a private investigator, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Brenda, known for her discretion and thoroughness. Brenda's findings were shocking, painting an even darker picture of Seraphina's care. The investigator uncovered instances of Seraphina leaving the twins alone at night, sometimes for hours, while she went out. There was a string of questionable men frequenting Seraphina's home, their presence often coinciding with the children being left unsupervised or neglected. Brenda provided irrefutable photographic evidence. Chloe, small and alone, sitting on the curb outside her school for over 40 minutes after dismissal, waiting for Seraphina to pick her up. Another photo showed Leo, looking small and disoriented, wandering down a residential street, knocking on strangers' doors and asking for food. The pictures were heart-wrenching, solid proof of the neglect. But the most damning piece of evidence was an audio recording. Brenda had managed to place a discreet recorder in the children's shared bedroom. The recording captured Seraphina's voice, slurred and filled with venom, screaming at the terrified children. "If you tell Grandma anything," Seraphina shrieked, "they'll take you away and you'll never see me again. Do you understand? You keep your mouths shut." The children's whimpers were barely audible beneath Seraphina's harsh threats. Evelyn listened, her hands trembling, tears streaming down her face. This was pure emotional abuse, designed to alienate the children from the very person trying to help them. With trembling hands, Evelyn compiled everything: Miss Davies's detailed notes, the troubling drawings, Derek's horrifying files, Brenda the investigator's comprehensive report, and her own meticulous journal documenting every instance of neglect and manipulation. It was a mountain of evidence, undeniable and devastating. She brought it all to Isabel, her lawyer, spreading the folders and papers across the large conference table. Isabel meticulously reviewed each piece, her expression growing graver with every page. Finally, she looked up, her eyes wide. "Evelyn," she said, her voice hushed. "This is overwhelming." But Isabel, ever the realist, also offered a caution. "Seraphina will fight back hard, Evelyn. She won't give up easily. She'll try to discredit you, to paint you as a bitter, vindictive mother-in-law." Evelyn met Isabel's gaze, her own eyes filled with an unwavering resolve. "I don't care what she says about me, Isabel. I don't care what names she calls me. These children are suffering. They need someone to fight for them, someone to protect them. And I am that person." Isabel nodded slowly, a small, knowing smile touching her lips. "Then let's do it," she declared, her voice firm. "With this evidence, we have a strong case. Let's file for emergency custody." "We can't wait." The days leading up to the custody hearing were a relentless torment for Evelyn. Sleep became a luxury she couldn't afford, her nights consumed by worry for Leo and Chloe. Every tick of the clock brought her closer to a confrontation that would decide their fate, and her stomach twisted with anxiety. Isabel, her lawyer, had been brutally honest, preparing Evelyn for the onslaught. "Seraphina will paint you as controlling, Evelyn," Isabel warned. "Interfering, unable to accept your son's marriage. She'll say you're a bitter mother-in-law trying to seize control." Evelyn had simply looked at her, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. "I'm just trying to be what their father would want me to be. Their protector." She had also steeled herself for the worst, knowing the children might be forced to say hurtful things. "Nobody else is standing up for them, Isabel," Evelyn had stated, her resolve hardening. "Whatever they say, I'll endure it." On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was a sterile, intimidating space. Seraphina entered, a vision of demure grief. She wore a tailored black dress, her hair neatly pulled back, her face carefully made up to show just the right amount of sorrow. She looked like the perfect grieving widow, a stark contrast to Evelyn's simple navy dress and understated appearance. Evelyn felt a pang of resentment at Seraphina's effortless performance. Just before the proceedings began, a familiar face appeared beside Evelyn. It was Brenda, her kind neighbor, offering silent moral support. "The whole neighborhood is pulling for you, Evelyn," Brenda whispered, squeezing her hand. "Don't you forget that." Evelyn offered a small, grateful smile, drawing strength from the unexpected solidarity. Leo and Chloe were brought into the courtroom by Miss Chen, their court-appointed guardian ad litem. Leo, usually so open and affectionate, avoided Evelyn's gaze, pressing himself against Miss Chen's side. Chloe, her small frame looking even tinier, offered only a brief, fleeting glance at Evelyn before fixating on her shoes, her dark hair shielding her face. Evelyn's heart ached at their distance. She noticed the subtle signs of neglect. Even now their clothes, while clean, looked a bit rumpled, and their eyes seemed shadowed, too tired for children their age. "They look so tired," Brenda murmured beside her, echoing Evelyn's thoughts. The initial arguments began, and, as predicted, Seraphina's attorney immediately launched into an attack on Evelyn. He painted her as an overbearing mother-in-law, relentless in her harassment of Seraphina, buying affection from the children with lavish gifts and interfering with Seraphina's decisions. Evelyn listened, her jaw clenched, trying to appear calm even as the accusations twisted like knives in her gut. Then it was time for the children's testimony. It would take place in the judge's private chambers, away from the intimidating atmosphere of the open court. Leo was first. He disappeared behind the closed door, and the wait for his return felt like an eternity. When he finally emerged, his eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders slumped. He clung to Miss Chen, refusing to look at either Evelyn or Seraphina. Chloe went in next. She stayed in the chambers for what felt like an excruciatingly long time. During Chloe's prolonged absence, Seraphina grew visibly agitated. She stood up abruptly, stepping out into the hallway to take a phone call. Evelyn, sitting near the door, overheard harsh whispers. "No, "You can't come over tonight because I'm in court, you idiot," Seraphina hissed into the phone, her voice laced with barely controlled fury. The callousness, the blatant disregard for the seriousness of the situation, sent a fresh wave of disgust through Evelyn. The idiot comment strongly suggested a new male companion, further confirming the investigators' report about questionable men in the house. When Chloe finally emerged from the judge's chambers, she looked different. There was a subtle shift in her demeanor. Her eyes, still wide, met Evelyn's directly, and in that brief connection, Evelyn saw a flicker. Was it hope? Or perhaps relief? Something had changed in that room. Evelyn later learned, through Isabel, that Chloe had slowly, hesitantly, begun to open up to the judge. She had mentioned the bruises from Mommy's friend Damien, had spoken of being left alone sometimes, but when asked about who she wanted to live with, Chloe had frozen, her small voice shutting down, the fear of Seraphina's threats overriding her burgeoning courage. Back in open court, Evelyn felt a strange, unnerving calm settle over her. She had done everything she could. She had gathered the evidence, faced the insults, endured the waiting. The fate of Michael's children was now in the hands of the court. Then, the judge called Leo to testify publicly. He was led back to the witness stand, standing on the small stool, his hands clasped nervously in front of him. His small, shaking voice, barely audible, filled the silent courtroom with the words Evelyn had steeled herself to hear. "Grandma Evelyn is the meanest grandmother in the world." Evelyn closed her eyes, a fresh wave of pain washing over her. But beneath it, her resolve remained unbroken. This was only the beginning. Stay with me as we uncover the truth behind a mother's manipulation and a grandmother's unwavering fight for justice. Every like, share, and subscribe helps amplify this story. After Leo's heartbreaking, rehearsed testimony, a heavy silence settled over the courtroom. Evelyn's heart ached, but her resolve remained firm. It was time for the truth to be heard. Isabel, Evelyn's lawyer, rose with quiet confidence. She began to methodically present the mountain of evidence they had meticulously compiled. School attendance records highlighted patterns of tardiness and unexplained absences. Investigator photos, stark and undeniable, showed Chloe abandoned at school pickup and Leo wandering the streets alone. Medical records, though limited, hinted at neglected minor injuries and a consistent lack of proper nutrition. Each piece of evidence was laid bare, exposing the cracks in Seraphina's facade. Seraphina's attorney, a slick, aggressive man, repeatedly objected, attempting to dismiss the evidence as hearsay or irrelevant. "Objection, Your Honor. Speculation," he barked, but the judge, his expression growing increasingly concerned, overruled most of them. His gaze often shifted from the documents to Seraphina, then to the weary faces of Leo and Chloe, who sat quietly with Miss Chen, the guardian ad litem. Next, Miss Davies, the twins' kindergarten teacher, was called to the stand. Her voice was quiet but firm, imbued with the conviction of someone who cared deeply for her students. She testified about the children's consistent hunger and fatigue, the worrying content of their artwork, and the numerous times Chloe had worn the same clothes. Most damningly, she recounted Leo's innocent confession. "He once told me, sometimes they eat cereal for dinner because Mommy's door is locked." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Seraphina's attorney tried to cross-examine Miss Davies, implying she was biased, but her calm, factual responses only strengthened her testimony. Then came Derek, Seraphina's ex-boyfriend. He sat stiffly on the witness stand, his discomfort palpable. He described Seraphina's volatile behavior during their relationship, recounting incidents of extreme manipulation, threats of self-harm to get her way, and sudden, explosive fits of rage. He spoke of her erratic moods and her alarming capacity for deceit. He concluded his testimony with a chilling statement. "I believe she is capable of using those children as pawns, Your Honor. She used me. She used Michael. She sees people as tools." The pivotal moment arrived when Isabel, with a quiet solemnity, announced, "Your Honor, we have one final piece of evidence." She then played the audio recording. The courtroom fell utterly silent as Seraphina's voice, distorted by fury and alcohol, filled the room. "If you tell Grandma anything, they'll take you away and you'll never see me again. Do you understand? You keep your mouths shut." The small, frightened whimpers of Leo and Chloe were undeniable. The effect was instantaneous and profound. The judge's expression darkened, a grim line forming between his brows. Seraphina's attorney looked utterly taken aback, his usual bluster deflating visibly. Seraphina herself turned a ghastly shade of white, her carefully constructed mask of composure crumbling. She stammered, trying to explain it away. I was just explaining court procedures to them. Evelyn is just using this tragedy, using Michael's death, to try to take my children away from me." Her voice rose in a frantic, desperate crescendo. It was then, in that moment of chaos, that something extraordinary happened. Chloe, her small face pale, but her eyes shining with a sudden, fierce determination, stood up from her seat beside Miss Chen. Her voice, though tiny, cut through Seraphina's protests. "That's not true," Chloe said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Mommy does leave us alone a lot." The courtroom gasped. Seraphina looked utterly shocked, her mouth agape. Chloe continued, her voice growing stronger, gaining confidence with each word. "Mommy told Leo to say, 'Grandma is mean.' She made us practice in the car." Hearing his sister's brave confession, Leo, who had been struggling to hold back his tears, finally broke. He burst into sobs, his small shoulders shaking uncontrollably. "I don't want to lie anymore," he cried out, his voice choked with emotion. The judge, a seasoned veteran of countless family disputes, brought his gavel down sharply. "Recess," he ordered, his voice ringing with authority. "Miss Chen, please take the children to a separate, private room immediately. We will reconvene in 30 minutes. When court resumed, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Seraphina sat stiffly, her eyes blazing with fury, but also with a hint of fear. The judge addressed her directly, his tone stern and unwavering. "Miss Miller," he began, using Seraphina's maiden name. The evidence presented, combined with the incredibly disturbing statements made by both children in open court, raises serious and immediate concerns about your ability to provide a safe and stable environment for Leo and Chloe. He then looked towards Evelyn. "Based on the compelling evidence of neglect, emotional abuse, and the children's direct testimony, I am granting temporary emergency custody of Leo and Chloe to their paternal grandmother, Evelyn Maxwell, effective immediately. This order is pending a full and thorough investigation by Child Protective Services." Seraphina exploded. "No, you can't do this. You can't take my children!" She shrieked, jumping to her feet. Her attorney tried to calm her, but she was beyond reason, her carefully constructed facade completely shattered, revealing the raw, unhinged woman beneath. Evelyn sat frozen, her mind struggling to process the words. Disbelief and overwhelming relief washed over her in equal measure. Tears, hot and silent, streamed down her face. Isabel squeezed her hand gently. "It's just the first step," she whispered, her voice full of warmth. "But Evelyn, it's a big one." The first night Leo and Chloe spent in Evelyn's home was a tapestry woven with threads of wonder and heartbreak. Chloe, usually reserved, clung to Evelyn's side, her small hand finding Evelyn's at every opportunity. Leo, however, was quieter, a palpable weight of guilt resting on his young shoulders. Evelyn had prepared their rooms with meticulous care, filling them with familiar comforts. Dinosaur-themed sheets for Leo, delicate butterflies for Chloe, and their favorite stuffed animals, brought over by Miss Chen. She hoped these small touches would make the transition less jarring. After a simple, comforting dinner, Evelyn sat with Chloe on her bed, gently brushing her hair. "Chloe," Evelyn began softly, "I want you to know something. I could never be mad at you for telling the truth today. It was very brave." Chloe looked up, her eyes wide. "Really?" she whispered. Evelyn nodded, pulling her into a gentle hug. "Really? It was the bravest thing you could have done," Chloe then confided, her voice barely audible. "Leo's mad at himself. Grandma." He thinks he was bad for saying you were mean. Evelyn's heart ached for her grandson. I'll talk to him, she promised, her resolve firm. Later, Evelyn found Leo curled up in his bed, clutching his beloved triceratops. He stared at the ceiling, his face streaked with dried tears. Evelyn sat on the edge of his bed. Leo, she said gently, Chloe told me you're sad about what you said in court. Leo turned, his eyes brimming again. I said you were mean, he mumbled. But you're not. I know you're not. Evelyn's throat tightened. It did hurt me a little, she admitted. But I also understood. Honey, I knew you were scared. It's okay. Then, Leo asked the question Evelyn had been dreading, his voice small and fragile. Is Mom ever coming back for us? Evelyn paused, choosing her words carefully. Honesty was paramount. I don't know, Leo, she said, her voice full of tenderness. Things are very complicated right now, but what I can promise you, no matter what happens, is that you will always be safe here, and you will always be loved. Leo, after a moment of consideration, leaned into a brief, hesitant hug. It was a small moment, but for Evelyn, it was a monumental step. Trust, she knew, would be rebuilt day by day, moment by moment. Weeks melted into a new rhythm. School, homework, regular meals, and consistent bedtimes became the anchors of their lives. The children started to flourish under the steady routine, though challenges persisted. Nightmares were frequent at first, and Leo, especially, would hoard food, hiding snacks in his pockets. A heartbreaking testament to past deprivation. Evelyn patiently, lovingly, worked through each hurdle. Supervised visits with Seraphina were difficult and emotionally draining for everyone. Seraphina would arrive laden with expensive gifts, showering the children with grand promises she rarely kept. She would play the victim, subtly trying to turn the children against Evelyn, but the judge had ensured the visits were closely monitored. Leo and Chloe often returned from these visits quiet and withdrawn, requiring Evelyn's gentle reassurance and patience to help them process the emotional turmoil. A lifeline for them all came in the form of Dr. Anya Sharma, the court-appointed therapist. Dr. Sharma was a kind, empathetic woman who not only helped the twins process their trauma but also counseled Evelyn on how to support them without undermining their mother, even as Seraphina continued her harmful patterns. Dr. Sharma emphasized consistency, love, and open communication. 3 months after Evelyn was granted temporary custody, the final ruling came down. The judge, having reviewed the full CPS investigation report and Dr. Sharma's recommendations, made his decision. Evelyn Maxwell was granted full legal custody of Leo and Chloe. Seraphina, due to the documented neglect and emotional abuse, would receive supervised visitation, contingent on her completion of mandated parenting classes and substance abuse treatment. Seraphina, her face contorted with rage, stormed out of the courtroom. Her furious gaze, burning with hatred, briefly locked with Evelyn's before she disappeared down the hallway. Evelyn felt a shiver, but also a deep sense of peace. It was over. Later, one sunny afternoon, Evelyn was gardening in her backyard, the twins helping her plant marigolds. Chloe, her hands covered in dirt, looked up, her brow furrowed in thought. "Grandma Evelyn," she asked, "are you happy that we live with you now?" Evelyn paused, choosing her words carefully. "Chloe," she said, looking into her granddaughter's earnest eyes, "I am happy that you and Leo are safe, and that you are healthy and growing. That makes my heart very happy." Leo, who had been quietly digging, suddenly looked up, his face serious. "Dad would be happy we're with you," he stated, with surprising certainty. Chloe nodded, a small smile gracing her lips. "Not mean at all," she chimed in, echoing Leo's earlier coerced words, but this time, with genuine affection. A year passed. Leo and Chloe thrived. Their laughter filled Evelyn's home, their once shadowed eyes now bright with curiosity and joy. Leo was a rambunctious, confident boy, and Chloe, though still sensitive, was blossoming into a compassionate and articulate girl. They still had their moments, their small scars from the past, but they were healing, surrounded by an abundance of love and stability. One quiet afternoon, Evelyn stood by Michael's grave, a small bouquet of his favorite flowers in her hand. She looked at the polished stone, then back at Leo and Chloe, who were playing a game of tag among the distant trees, their shouts of joy carrying on the breeze. "We're going to be okay, Michael," she whispered, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. But this time, it was a tear of peace. "I'm keeping my promise. I'm taking care of them. They're safe, and they're loved." Watching them play, Evelyn knew, with every fiber of her being, that every painful step, every insult, every battle had been worth it. Their future was bright, a testament to a grandmother's unwavering love and fight.